meet somebody new. Hopefully you've already met some interesting people. So just give you 2 more minutes to come on up. So go ahead and please do that now. And then I'm going to introduce my colleague Kevin, and he's going to tell you just a little bit about the logistics of this event and some of the people that helped us out. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so first of all, hi guys, I'm Kevin. Very nice to meet you. Some directly, some indirectly. I hope you guys are having a great startup week. It is obviously, like, there are lots of choices of things you can go to, so we thank you for spending some time with us. I am the campus director and the community manager for the New York Code and Design Academy here in Austin. Some people who registered for this event are captains of industry, some are in HR, and some span the wide variety of roles in the tech community, or maybe you're just interested in what's going on in tech. We thank you all for being here. If there are any of you who are actually thinking about learning to code, who don't already know how to do that kind of thing, we are throwing an open house tonight, so it's a little bit of an opportunity for me to say, just pick up one of these guys with the fist on it, or come talk to me afterwards, and I'd love to say hi. And with that, it's my treat.
Do you want to tell them a little bit about our nukes as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So our friends at Nuke's Eatery, which is up in the Arboretum, if you guys have never been there, provided today's lunch. So if you enjoy what you had, go by and see them. I told those guys that we try and give them a plug and just express our appreciation for being a part of today's event.
What is the name again?
Nukes. If you forget, just grab a cup on the way out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's also collateral back there too, so there may be a brochure or menu or whatnot.
Yeah, so absolutely, if you're up in that area, please say hi to them.
Yeah, and then with that, you guys have met the king of the icebreaker, my friend, colleague Brian Fountain, who managed to snag the @Fountain with Twitter, which I was pretty impressed with. We'll have to talk about that another time. But Brian is also the Chief Creative Officer for the New York Code Design Academy. He's a former Austinite. Don't hold that against him. No. But he's in New York now and agreed to come down and share this talk. So with that, welcome Brian.
Thanks. I am a former Texan. I've been in New York since about 2000, but as many of you know, like, once you're Texan, that basically supersedes anything else that you are. You're always Texan first. But I am the Chief Creative Officer of the New York Code and Design Academy. My role there is maintaining our creative voice and vision. I also think a lot about what our products should be. For those of you who don't know, New York Code and Design Academy is often in the type of school that's sometimes called a boot camp. So we have an intensive, and then we also have evening classes. We have a lot of graduates who leave our programs. And so as an organization, we think a lot about the process of job placement, about recruiting. We think a lot about what do companies, what is their insights that they provide. But then also, like, where is the future of this going? There is a lot sort of changing in this world and in this environment. And we want to figure out how do we get ahead of it and how do we see where it's going. So first off, let's just talk a little bit about where we're at. Recruiting is hard. Anybody that's in this position, they probably see this job as an endless challenge. As soon as you get somebody placed at a position, there's a new position that's coming along. And it's not just, oh, I just need to find the right person. Often it's sort of this cost benefit or this triangulation of I need to find the right person who's available, who has these particular skills. And that's a very tough sort of hole to fit for a lot of recruiters. And for some people who are trying to be recruited, kind of broken, I want to read you an email that was sent to a developer named David. Hi David, I'm reaching out to see if you could, if you'd be looking to make a career move. I'm searching for creative and talented Ruby developer to add to a rapidly growing team. The position is located in San Francisco Bay Area. You do not need to be there now, but should be willing to relocate there within a short but realistic time frame. Relocation expenses will be shared by my client. They are serious about bringing on the right talent, so they will pay the right person. Base salary is open and depends on your experience. Cheers, Kelly. Now, on the surface, not a terrible email to send to somebody that you're potentially hiring. But the thing is, David is a developer called David Hannemeyer Hansen, and he started a company called 37 Signals, now known as Basecamp. And so she was asking for a developer to join their company as a Ruby developer, but David personally created a framework called Ruby on Rails, which is now in its 10th year of maturity. So she sent an email to probably one of the most experienced Ruby developers that there are as a working professional, and was just curious if he's interested in moving to San Francisco to be part of the Living Social team. So the answer was no. No, he was not interested. If anybody was curious about how that worked out, he did not accept that job. And that is the tough place that experienced candidates find themselves in, which is they feel like they are being blasted to with no personalization and trying to, certainly recruiters need to be efficient, and they need to figure out how to reach a large amount of people. But then also, we all want to feel like somebody actually is talking directly to us. All of us have that thing where we received a mass email. It's like, hey, can you donate to my whatever? And you're like, oh, that's CC to a bunch of people. Never mind, I do not have to pay attention to that. If it's personalized and you think it comes to you, then you're like, all right, I'm going to read this. So it's hard for people that are being recruited. It's also hard for people that are trying to find a job because people are in very different levels of their experience. So we have a lot of grads from our boot camp class, and they are basically pre-professional. They have most of the skills that they need to get started and show up on the job, but they're in this awkward position of having people take a shot with them and give them a chance. And it's a hard thing to look at somebody and ask them just the right questions to figure out, oh, do they know what they're doing? Will they be a great fit for my team? And also there's a bias for people that are unemployed. We know from studies that they get less job offers because they're naturally more suspect. So we all have this catch-22, want people with jobs, or they prefer people with jobs. Almost somebody's doing something right. At least that's how the thinking goes. So it's difficult. So why is it so hard? Well, ultimately, I think a lot of this tension is we all want the best, okay? We want just a little bit more than we deserve, and there is a tension there that we all find ourselves in. I want to share with you this video.
Let's imagine teenagers in a high school. You've got a guy and a girl who are both 10s. Well, what's going to happen to them is they're going to get a lot of offers from the opposite sex, and they're eventually going to have some sense that they have lots of more opportunities. If you're a 5 or a 6, as most people are, they'll let you know. You'll get feedback, basically.
This is something we all have to learn, and it can be a painful process. To glimpse a sped-up version of this learning curve, Dr. Kenrick put a microphone on the woman who was ranked number 3.
It's a little tough to tell, but they all have different numbers, 1 through 10, on their foreheads.
I guess everyone's going to start off going to the number 10 guy. 3, 1, 4, 10. Oh, 10 is taken now. Nobody will make eye contact with me. I'm not really used to that. I like that one. Yeah. But his number's too low. I can do better. Let's see. 1, no, 7. I can, oh, he's being paired up. I have a feeling I'm a very low number because no one's coming over to me at all right now. Come on. 2, no, I can do better than that. I'm running out of numbers. 1, 8. I guess this is all that's left. Okay, I'm stuck with 2.
I'm stuck with 2. The story of so many of our lives is we kind of want this perfect scenario, but everybody wants a perfect scenario for themselves. And so in the job place, there is this sort of weird sorting mechanism that none of us probably feel like we're in control of or completely understand. And in some ways, online recruiting is like online dating, in the sense that they both suck right now. They are a terrible experience for most of those participants. We are moving to digital because it's more efficient, but in that efficiency, a lot of us feel disconnected from that process, whether you're seeking a job or whether you are offering someone a job. We have these tools that allow us to reach massive amounts of people, but it doesn't make the process that much easier. The perfect job is a little bit like the perfect relationship, in the sense that it's an existentialist nightmare to try to solve it, right? So many of us have been in that position where we're trying to decide, is this person someone I'm interested in? I don't know. I don't have a sense. What does the perfect relationship feel like? And in a similar way, jobs can feel like that. What is the perfect job for me? When you think about it, some of the hardest things that we do on this earth is try to figure out what we want to do with our life and who we want to do it with, right? And there is no knowable answer. Ultimately, we want great tools, we want the ability to vet the information that we have, and we want to feel confident with the decision that we make. So those two pursuits are kind of similar in many ways, and honestly, in the recruiting space online, we're seeing sort of a natural convergence when it comes to the software that's being designed for us. So this is an app called Switch. And it is based, these profiles come through and they show you a bunch of, this is necessarily better, but I think different things, and we're more or less trying to carve up what's happening in the dating space for employment as well. But I suspect that the thing that's really holding us back from finding that perfect job or that perfect employee is not that we can swipe left or swipe right. It's got to be something probably a little deeper than that. And it's worth sort of trying to understand what that is. In some ways, when we talk about employers and their relationships on the job, there's this interesting sort of scenario where we often get asked, like, what do you do here? What would you say you do here? Many of you know this scene.
Is you take the specifications from the customers and you bring them down to the software engineers.
Yes, that's right. Well, then I just have to ask, why couldn't the customers just take them directly to the software people, huh?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because engineers are not good at dealing with customers.
So you physically take the specs from the customer?
Well, no, my secretary does that, or the fax.
So then you must physically bring them to the software people.
Well, no. Yeah, I mean, sometimes.
What would you say you do here?
Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people?
So in the same way that there's often this tension of employers, that's a little extra clip. Employers not understanding what's going on with their employees, often we don't think about the reverse of that scenario, which is employees or potential employees have that right to also ask companies, what would you say you do here? And that's something that we don't see a lot of parity in on the other side of the table, which is companies capable of explaining very succinctly what it is that they do as an organization. And what I'm speaking to here is this idea of a mission-driven organization. Do you have a mission? Because there is this very sort of cold reduction often that we fall into, which is what's the salary and what's the benefits, right? If you don't have a mission, then you're basically telling that particular employee what we care about is money, and that's what we're motivated by. There's nothing inherently wrong with being motivated by money as an organization, but we sometimes have ways of letting our employees know that that's what we care most about. How many of you are part of an organization or have been part of an organization that has a very clear mission statement? Show of hands. Great. So that's about half to maybe a little more of you. And how many of you, when you were part of that organization, you could more or less quote that from memory, like, or at least you could paraphrase it in a very meaningful way? How many? Okay, so about half of that amount. All right, so we have obviously, we work for mission-driven statements, but then also there's sometimes a disconnect between actually understanding and being able to communicate that mission too. But a lot of organizations don't go through the extra step of trying to figure out who they are and what they want to do. So that's something that if you were on a date, you would pick up immediately. We've all probably been on situations where it's sort of like, I don't think this person has a plan for their life, and I don't believe they'll ever put one together. And that's telling. It's telling, especially if you're in a boat where you feel like you know the direction of your life. So it's important to ask organizations, what is your purpose too? The New York Code and Design Academy, our mission is to empower those who seek to debug the world. We're a school, and we know that a lot of our students, that there are problems in their lives that they want to solve, and we believe that the skills like web development, UI, UX, and native mobile development are the most marketable skills that they need to see the change that they want, either in themselves, in their career, or in their community. And we hope we give them those tools, and we work really hard to connect them with the outcomes that they want. And it's really important to us that not only our students see that in themselves, but our teammates see that in themselves as well. And so I think for the future, one of the things that companies owe themselves is to think critically about what their role is in the world, or at least in the community, or in that city, and to be able to express it clearly. So let's talk about some current trends that are going on in the actual recruitment process. So paper is dead, all right? That is, I mean, I don't know how many of you have actually printed a resume within the last like 2 or 3 years and gave it to somebody like physically when you weren't already like just in the job interview. Yeah, like one, yeah, maybe, oh well. Paper is dead for promotional purposes, not quite so. That's our little indie kind of zine style promotion for our event. But when it comes to the resume is all but gone. It's being scooped out. It's sort of now going to LinkedIn, where you sort of have a persistent resume online. Or it's being submitted through different job forums as well. Some of them, you submit your resume, you attach it as a PDF or a Word doc. Others, you have to fill in forms. But that is a sign of the time, and that's where things are going. There's also video interviews. This is becoming more and more popular. There are actually even startups around the space of helping employers connect with potential employees through video of varying levels of efficacy. Obviously, you know, that's a tough call because it's a technology creep issue, which is how good are you as a potential employee with getting video up and running and making your video look nice, right? We know that a lot of employees are challenged by working with Microsoft Word or a publisher program to make their resume look great, and then we've got templates. There's no template for setting up your home with great lighting and not looking dark, or picking out the right wardrobe that you think reflects you perfectly for a job interview. So this is where stuff is headed, but there's going to be some painful learning curves along the way. There's also venturing into what I'll call asynchronous video interviews, the idea that you record a video of yourself and it's just there persistent and employees can review that at any time. Now, this is really great in the sense that it's on demand and that it's very shareable within an organization. So if I really like you and I think you're great, I can forward you to 3 or 4 people. They can review that and be like, oh my gosh, this person's great. Let's go ahead and bring them in. Let's talk to them. Let's get to know them. But then it's also bad because when we talk to people, if we're good and we're doing our job right, we're reading social cues. We're getting the sense of that's something that they're not interested in. Oh, that is something that they're interested in. I'll speak to that a little bit more. And so there's always going to be good and there's always going to be bad with this. Has anybody experimented with video interviews at all? See about 2, 4, 5, 6 hands. Okay, great. Does anybody have sort of an opinion on what side of it you were with? Either you were using it or you were trying to potentially hire somebody using it? Yeah.
So I had, for one company, I had to do answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of hard to know what was enough, what was sufficient.
Yeah.
And then the cues, like you said.
And so it was asynchronous, that one. You were recording it ahead of time. Right, and it just feels like you're just putting yourself out there into the void. In many ways, and you don't know what you're getting back. And for many employees who don't see themselves as a performer, it puts you in this weird state where you feel like, oh, I think I need to learn how to act all of a sudden, or figure out how people see. One has access to a video setup, though increasingly more and more people do. These are pretty affordable when it comes to purchasing a laptop. Yeah?
What's the risk things with video interviews specifically, things like ethnic and age judgments. I'll use that as a...
Yep, they're there.
Yeah. And
they're all there. They don't go away.
Things that are visual, but maybe not tactile on a digital resume, but visual on a video interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Many of you have read studies or at least heard about this distinction. So for example, I forget the orchestra. I think it might have been the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, where they did blind testing, and so the judges, to let them in, couldn't know the gender of the particular people that were playing anything else as well. And that when the people who were allowing in the particular soloists did not know the situation or any of the particulars of that soloist, more women were admitted to the program. So there are natural biases in there. Many of you have already read articles about Airbnb trying to correct the issue where different ethnicities and races are not being leased to or rented to at the same level as others, right? And so we know that there's prejudice baked into that system as well as resumes with images or without images, or ethnic sounding names or non-ethnic sounding names. We know that the recruiting process is prejudiced by that. Yeah, had a thought, question?
Question, actually.
Yeah.
So we tried to interview all of our shortlists on this last year for the grad school admission, and it turns out that interview process helped eliminate some biases towards underrepresented groups.
Physical interview, in person.
So am I understanding correctly, you're saying a Skype interview limits that biasing process?
Yeah, it helps giving underrepresented groups more opportunities to present themselves.
So it gives underrepresented groups more opportunities to present themselves, for those of you who didn't hear.
Can you substantiate that somehow? How does it do that?
Yeah. Oh, it's just for grad school admissions, I feel specifically recommendation matters a lot. So people care about opinions from people who are already in the community and who they already know. But then if like an undergraduate student from an underrepresented institution may not have access to great researchers, may not have chance to do research with great researchers to start with. So if they were going on a Skype interview, they would have a chance to talk about the work they've done, like to prove that they do have experience and ability to succeed in grad school.
So it's a phase of an interview that gives someone an opportunity that they might not otherwise have?
Yeah.
And is it because of the technology, or is it?
Well, how is it different from like the personal statement or whatever? Like, why would they be able to present it themselves, but they wouldn't be able to write it down as a personal statement?
No, I think Skype's just easily accessible.
Yeah, right.
It's just an access.
Well, but more writing something in a Word document that's more easily accessible than doing the Skype.
No, I think what's happening on Skype is that you actually have the ability to connect with people that aren't always available personally, or it's just the same thing as like your video interview. You're just having more opportunities, and it's easier to see them and interact rather than scheduling, flying somebody in, waiting, you know.
Yeah, certainly if, when it comes to geographic distances and getting a job, that opens it up. Someone might be very interested in moving to a new geographic region if the job is available to them, but maybe the cost of actually coming there and doing that is prohibitive, especially if they're out of the country. Yeah?
And a step further, please, on the age question.
Yeah.
Is there any recommendations how to address that in a positive way? I mean,
From which perspective? As the potential employee or the potential recruiter?
As a potential employee.
Yeah.
Coming to the table with, a lot of experience.
Yeah, that's, especially in technology, we know that ageism is a very real issue. In some venues, being really, really experienced counts for something. Like, for example, if you have experience with older technologies, or you just have a lot more experience with computer science basics if we're talking about programming, but there are certain types of jobs, especially ones that are constantly moving through technology, that might be prejudiced against. So, if you say, oh, I'm a great designer and I know all about typesetting and offset printing, well, that organization might say, well, we've just, from cost purposes, we don't really do any of that type of printing. So now suddenly that massive amount of knowledge that experienced designer has is kind of getting thrown under the bus. Not to mention that if the brand is cool, or if it's aimed towards younger demographics, then there's this natural prejudice that we have to say like, oh, well, probably this person won't get that demographic, or they won't be able to connect with them. And so we know that that's happening, in some levels, and that takes training on the part of the recruiter. There's no other way to get around that other than just training that potential person who's doing the hiring to be conscious of those prejudices. Yep.
And how do you train the employee that's searching how to get around those?
That's a great question. I don't think I immediately have deep insight into that, other than signaling your experience and your ability to adapt. Because I think that's the key prejudice that a lot of people hold in their mind, is that, is this person going to be able to change with the times, or if we need to make a different call on something, are they going to be able to be suited to that? Cool. Let's keep going. All right, so credentialing, this is back. It's coming back. It's kind of coming back as micro-credentialing. We see in a lot of areas. One organization that's playing around with this is Degreed. Any of you familiar with this this brand? Yeah. So it showed up on a couple radars, and different companies are trying to take a stab at this. And the issue, the problem that they're solving, or they're trying to solve, is that it's really hard to vet the knowledge in someone's brain. Specifically, there are so many technologies that are coming and going, especially in the world of software development, for example, for startups that are trying to be basically technology-based companies. And so this is one of the issues that has to be wrangled with. So either you have to have an extremely competent recruiter who understands the breadth of all of these technologies, or you hopefully have some sort of outside body that can vet them. But obviously the stumbling block with this is that we have to trust that body. We have to trust that standards body, and that we have to have some sort of semblance of what this means, and that we can trust it. If they say they've got a 9 out of 10 score, then you can believe it. Or if they've got 4 stars, then you need to trust what that is. And we're not there yet, but I think that there is something here. And I think we're going to see more in this space. I think employers want the sort of to be able to look at somebody and say, okay, great, you've got this little badge, you've got that little badge. And honestly, what we're getting into is micro-credentialing, right? So we talk about particular technologies. If we think about a front-end developer, for example, they have a lot of different skill sets. So that might be HTML, that might be CSS, that might be JavaScript, and even other aspects of JavaScript like jQuery, certain libraries, as well as front-end frameworks like Angular. And especially in the web dev world, all these technologies are sort of turning over or changing in every 9 months or so. And so you really want some sort of outside force to vet and verify that. So we've got about 15 more minutes, and I want to just share with you, how many of you would say you put yourself in the camp of a job seeker, or you're kind of looking for a job in technology? Okay, great, awesome. And then how many of you are sort of either in that position of possibly vetting or hiring people, or needing to give people jobs as part of your normal work? How many of you would sort of fall in that camp? All right. People are looking for a job. Look at those hands. All right. So we've got about 10 and 10, somewhere in that neighborhood, roughly. So I want to give you some quick hacks for job seekers. Decide where you want to work. If you can go to somebody and say, I really want to work for your organization, can you help me figure out how to do that? Most people would say like, yes, I appreciate that level of passion in somebody. Now, obviously, certain companies are hard to get into. If that company is Google, know that it is very competitive to be a part of that. But not everybody is passionate about working at Google. But there probably is some organization that you could get up every day and just smile from ear to ear knowing that you get to work at that company. And if that's true, then bring that to the job interview. If you're having trouble getting noticed, write a letter, okay? In a world of email posts, Slacks, tweets, statuses, pokes, and snaps, writing a letter is like the nuclear bomb of may I have your attention, please, in today's modern world. So if you really want to get noticed, and you really do want to work at a particular place, and you were to write them a letter, it would be massive. Yeah?
Are you saying to write like a physical letter?
I'm talking about a physical letter that goes into a physical envelope, and there's these things called stamps that you get and you put on them and you put it in the mail. Looks like it's something similar to that. This, if that person...
What are stamps?
If that person doesn't read your letter all the way to the end, then you know that person is a cyborg and you do not want to work for that organization either way. So that's one sort of interesting hack. Also, just make sure your letter looks like this and not like that. All right. So also, here's something that's important to remember. It's who you know. Now, when I first heard this, I was very frustrated and upset because, oh, wait a minute, I don't know people. But it turns out no one ever tells you the other side of this is you can get to know them. Okay? It just takes a concerted effort. So where do you get to know people? Well, you can go to meetups. You can come to organizations or meetings like this and get to meet people. Now, how many of you have been to a meetup? All right. So for a lot of people, the meetup is sort of this mysterious thing that they don't understand. But this is how you do meetups. Yes, you can try to introduce yourself to a lot of people. That's hard and that's scary, especially if you're not an extrovert. But here's the secret. Just show up to like 4 or 5 of them. And what you're going to notice as you go, you're going to be like, oh, this is a lot of new faces. I don't know anybody. But then as you go like the 3rd or 4th time, you start seeing like that same person over and over again. And about that 5th time, where there are 3 or 4 people that have come to all of them, new people will still be coming in. And so you just walk over to that other person that you've seen before and be like, who are all these new people, huh? And I'm like, yeah, I know. And then naturally, they'll gravitate towards you just because you're more familiar. And then you'll get to know people. Obviously, if people are working at organizations or companies that you want to work for, this is the best way to get to know them. And you can also go to hackathons or go to similar scenarios where people are coming together and building and talking about those. Start conversations on social media. The important thing, I think, is to always be doing something, always be building something, because it gives you a platform to talk about. All of us have been to a party where you're trying to break the ice with somebody, and you're like, so what do you do? And you're like, that's not important. And you're like, oh, what do you like doing on the weekends? I don't know, nothing really. You're like, all right, I did my job. I tried to be a human being to this person. I'm moving on, right? Similarly, when it comes to being a professional, if we have something, even if it's in the works, it's not even launched yet, if there's something that we're just moving forward with or we're trying to get built, that's something, and that's something to connect over. It also shares with people what you're passionate about, and you can connect with them over that. Find out what they're passionate about and see if there's an overlap there. And of course, always market yourself. And that could be being online. That could just be thinking about what it is that you want to do. If you want to be a web developer, or you want to be a landscape artist, or you want to be a painter, you have something unique about you. It's not enough just to say, I want to be an architect. You have to say something that's a little bit more meaningful, like I want to be an architect that transforms the way people see their kitchens. That's specific, right? That is something that gives me insight about like, oh, I know how to talk to you now. I know how to connect with you. And there's a lot to be gained by just tweaking how you think about yourself and kind of solidifying it. When I meet people, especially as an artist, I tell them I like to tell stories in unexpected places. And for me, a lot of my life as a creative person has been intersecting narrative and technology in fun and exciting ways. And so that's one way that I think about myself. So let's talk about hacks for recruiters. Write a scraper. This is something that we do in our organization. This may not be appropriate for you, but we have a proximity scraper for GitHub because we're always looking for amazing developers to be our instructors. And so this is a script that goes on to GitHub and finds out everybody in a geographic area and looks at their commits and works. And then we write them a very customized email that says, hey, it's not generic, but we look at what their projects are, and once we find them, and we say, we noticed this project, it looks interesting to us, we'd love to talk to you about it, and it comes from one of our executives as well. And that has been very successful for us. There's actually, I think, even a startup that spammed to me this morning that does something similar. Interestingly, I'll share that with you. Let's see here.
Well, but you still refer to those letters as spam.
Yeah, but because they didn't do their due diligence. Let's show you this. Hi, Brian. I'm a developer relations engineer at Source D. We're working on improving developer recruitments. And then we think that you could be a good fit for the position as front-end engineer at Zenly, since we were actively reaching out. And then they pitched me at, I think, like 40,000 euros or something like that, right? So that's fine. I thank you for that job offer. But also, I'm the chief creative officer of an organization that has like 5 or 6 offices. So, I mean, I think they found me, but I don't think they did a lot of due diligence about trying to vet me or try to figure out like what it is that I would actually be interested in a job. So this feels like spam to me. This literally was sent to me 7 hours ago. You know, it's still a problem. And the thing is, that organization is positioning themselves as being the smart organization that goes out and scrapes GitHub and gets you customized candidates. So we still have a last mile issue. Skills Finder. This is our parent organization, Strayer Education, is working on a project that is for large recruitment. So think about like CVS or Walgreens, where they may need to hire 10,000 people over the course of a year. And so Skills Finder will not only tell you about job opportunities, but it tells you what to expect on the job, which is this is what your workday will be like. Is that something that you're interested in? As opposed to people who don't quite even understand what that job might entail, what the responsibilities would include. And so at a massive scale, when we think about hiring large numbers of people, there are interesting new things that are being pursued in that space. Skills Finder is one of them. There are others that are trying to do that, and you can find them on Skills Finder. Bootcamp grads, if you're looking for software technologists, obviously in Austin, everyone, almost every startup is looking for really great software developers. And there are multiple organizations. New York Code and Design Academy obviously has an office here in Austin. We're at North Austin. And this is a good fit for a lot of people. But when I think about the future, even this program, I think, has its weakness. Because boot camp grads are not for everybody. Mostly because they don't quite match perfectly with that organization's needs. And so that's not to say our grads don't get jobs. They do, but there's even a tension there, which is when our recruiters are trying to meet our grads who have great skills, and we've taught, for those who don't know what a boot camp is, we take students who have potential but have never really studied programming, and over the course of 3 months, and some programs are longer, we teach them how to be junior web developers to give them professional skills to start the job. And we have a terrific success rate, and so many of our students say it's the best thing of their life. But we know that there's also tons of other people that would like to hire grads, but they don't know how to vet them. They don't necessarily know, like, what do I say to this person to find out if they'd be right? And so there's a tension there in our marketplace too that we're still trying to solve. One of the ways some companies have solved this, especially the ones that need to scale it out, are on-site intensives. Living Social, the one that tried to cold email David Hannemeyer Hansen, the creator of Ruby Rails, they tried to solve their problem in a different way, and this is around 2010 when they started this. They created something called Hungry Academy, where they hired people to come in and just train them on site of their organization. Here, a little closer to home, Rackspace did something similar but not all companies have this expertise. And so there is this issue. Not every company has also a group that's smart enough to spin up its own internal training program. And so one of the future things that I think is going to happen are customized intensives. So I think for organizations that need to hire at scale, they are going to implement something like this. So what are the advantages of something like this? Well, first off, one of the tensions that recent grads have is that they learn a particular stack. When I say stack, I mean technologies. For example, Ruby on Rails is a back-end technology, or maybe you've heard of Angular or something. But there's literally dozens and dozens of options of what you could learn out there. And then they go to work for a place and they say, do you know our specific scenario of things? And the person is like, I kind of know these 2, but not these other 4, but I can learn those other 4. And so now that potential employer has to make this call of, Well, do I trust them that they can learn it? I don't know. Or do I ask them to come back later? They seem like a good candidate. They seem smart and they seem driven. And so there's always this tension. So if a customized intensive, you could teach your own specific stack on that. Also, I think that gets thrown under the bus a lot is when you train people on site, especially like on an on-site intensive, you can teach them your values. Hopefully as an organization you have clearly defined values, but you can also say, hey, this is what's important to us. And in your team, this is the way we want you to think. It's not just about the technology, but you can also inculcate those potential recruits into this world that they're about to enter into. And I think if you start to see like, wait a minute, their values don't align with us, then you can make a decision early in the program and let them go pursue other things. And then interestingly, the cost to fund this is sort of already there. Many people, when they recruit, they pay recruiters 20% of the salary. So if you think, for example, like a beginning average web developer, that might be $65,000 in salary. And so at 20%, you've already got the cost there to fund a potential recruit on campus. And we believe in this so strongly that this is actually happening. So we're currently working with an organization that is it's basically a global player in the travel space, and we're going to be training up to 120 plus developers for them over the next year and a half as part of this program. And so this is one of the things why we definitely believe this is partly part of the future. It makes a ton of sense in the web development space, but we think increasingly this is going to make a lot more sense in other spaces, especially for organizations that say we need 20, we need 30, we need 60 of these people over the next year. Many of you probably even read that GM Canada made an announcement that they need to hire 1,000 engineers over the next, I think, 5 to 6 years, I believe it is. 1,000 engineers. That's crazy. You know, at that point, that scale, you might as well just create your own university on site and train them there. And we're going to see more and more of this, especially in the tech world, as that demand grows and increases. Okay, so that's it. Let me just see how we're doing on time. Okay, we're at 3 minutes left. I want to just answer any questions that you may or may not have while we have that. Yeah, anything? Yeah, right here.
How many, for senior IT people, how many years on LinkedIn or the resume, generally speaking, how many years should they go back? Like, where should they cut out? Where should they, you know, what are some creative ways that older workers can not give away their age, such as obviously leaving off their college graduation date? What are some other tricks like that, LinkedIn and other things that, you know, that you have any tips for?
Yeah, to me, and I know this is hard because I think the older the potential candidate is, the busier that they are in their lives. But I think the more work that you can show that's recent and relevant, the better. So, you know, I think the great thing about age is that you're more strategic in a way that perhaps a younger person seeking that job might not be. And so you can think specifically about that organization and about what they would want to hear in that job interview, and you can build or you can create projects that are more aligned with that brand. So, you know, if you look at my particular profile on LinkedIn, I put a lot of the projects that I work on there, and it's a lot. But the thing is, I spent about 48 to 72 hours, maybe a little longer, working on them, because that's all they really needed to sort of show the idea. Nobody actually really cares too much, like, is this an operating business? How much money did you make off of it? Because that's not what I did them to do. I made them because I wanted to see them in the world. And I think there's an opportunity, which is if you want to go work for Nike, or if you want to go work for a health organization, then you can spend 48 hours of working on a project over a couple days and put together something that's recent work, whether that's design or developing or even just HR, you know, where you're saying like, I am speaking at this meetup group on this topic this Wednesday, and that's how passionate I am about the subject. Is that helpful? Awesome. Other questions? And if you need to skedaddle, absolutely. If you want to grab a sandwich on the way out, you're more than welcome. Yep.
I have a question about these. What level of coding skill do you need to have for these on-site trainings? Like, because I'm coming from a point where I just started in tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
Film, and I'm Like, am I a candidate for that, or do I need to go to boot camp first and then go to that?
So the way that our particular program is designed now with our on-site training one is that anybody can start from scratch. Now that's not to say we wouldn't accept somebody with more training, but the point is that as successful as the boot camp has become in a lot of ways, it's still a big ask for a lot of people to take 3 months of their life off and spend anywhere from 10 to 15 grand in the hopes that it will turn into a job. And so we get into this really weird situation where it's sort of like, and we work very hard as an organization to fight against this, which is like, oh, who's the people that can do this? Well, it's a bunch of people with bachelor's degrees, or it's guys that look like me, you know, and it's sort of like, yeah, we have tons of access, or we have spare capital. And so you have this situation where we're sort of looking at the job site and we're like, oh, who would be a great fit? Well, if I look at the job site, it's a bunch of white guys with bachelor's degrees and 5 years of professional experience, right? And so it's like, especially when we talk about the programs that sort of like, oh, pay on the other side of it, well, then our fear is, and we don't do this, because like one of the reasons what we fear is that if you pay on the other side of it, then an organization naturally optimizes to make its candidates look like the job market. And right now, the job market isn't very representational of the way our society is. So that's an issue. And so we think that something like this, especially for larger organizations that think a lot about diversity and inclusion, this could be an on-site intensive that's customized for that organization, could be a breakthrough product.
Not only that, I think it's really amazing because I'm coming from a completely different background. I also just graduated, so I'm in that weird where I'm like a pre-professional, but I have already had professional experience. I think the tech world is like its own universe.
Yep.
And I think going straight to a boot camp, I've been having that discord where I think you miss out on the culture of like going straight into a company and learning like all of those resources and stuff. So this is amazing.
And we tell a lot of our grads too, who do our on-site training and our intensive, your pre-professional, you know, your current professional experience is not a hindrance to you. There is an organization that can utilize it, and especially those who are coming from legal, medical, financial, all of those things. I had a student who graduated with a financial background and knew nothing of coding, left there within 2 days of the program. And this is not typical, like this is New York City, was offered like $85K to start at an organization. Like literally he had just spent 3 months learning this skill. And that's atypical, but the point was they valued that background that that person had and said, we can leverage this and utilize this on our job. So you haven't, you know, switching careers, especially in technology, you haven't wasted all that time in the professional world. Actually, you've probably diversified yourself in a way that's going to be attractive to a company, some company. Not all of them necessarily, but probably one of them. Other questions? Oh, there was a hand over here. No? Okay, good. Yep.
So a few times you were mentioning like custom stacks, basically. And how to handle that from a recruiting perspective. But what about from the other side? Is there any advice that you have for potential employees?
Absolutely. I mean, this is where investigative work can come in handy. There's no person that, you know, if you emailed and you said, I want to go up and show up at this site and go on a job interview with them, if you emailed them a month before the job interview and said, can you tell me about the technologies that you're using? They would all tell you exactly the technologies that you're using. And if you had that amount of time, you'd be smart to research them and to say, and even to build little tiny prototypes, right? There's tutorials, there's starter tutorials for all of these. And what I tell our students who are going on the job site, and we've got a lot of experience with them, they freak out. They're like, they're gonna ask me something that I don't know about. And it's like, yeah, I mean, our whole career as web developers is learning new stuff all the time. When you think about the way the web worked 5 years ago and the way it works today, you'd be an idiot to think that 5 years from now it's gonna look the exact same way it looks today. It's going to change, and the technologies that support them are gonna change as well. But the point is, you can say, oh, yeah, I knew that you worked on this, so I looked up online, I found a great tutorial, I spent 10 or 12 hours working on this and built it, and here's what I can tell you about it. That's already advantage over somebody when they come in and they say, hey, do you know about new stack that's been around for 6 months? And you say, no, I don't know anything about that. Okay. And you're in silence, right? So just even being able to talk about it is an advantage to say, and what we tell our students too is, you don't have to lie and pretend that you know a lot more. You just tell them what you know. You're like, I know that it does this and that it's often used for this. I spent 10 hours working with it and here's my take on it. And that tells me a lot about your internal process and the way you think. Especially web development, it's about problem solving. And I think designers will tell you that they feel that way too, that they're here to solve problems. And so if you can just, as a potential employer, if you can just give me insight into your thought process, show me how your brain works, AKA that it does work, right? Because we've all talked to people, we've met people and you're like, I don't think you think through all the things that you say, right? And so just have some confidence in it. And this is something that we try to work really, really hard, especially I think with our female grads, that, you know, imposter syndrome is a very real issue where they're like, I'm gonna go in there and they're gonna stump me on something. It's like, absolutely, you will get stumped on something. All of our students do, because they're basically trying to see how far you can go before you sort of tap out with your knowledge. And obviously, like, if you were to answer every single question, they'd be happy, they would love it. But the point is they just need to find out how much do you actually know. So the process of being overwhelmed or getting asked something that you don't know is going to be part of that. Yep.
Yeah, but the next candidate they interview is going to know one or two more questions and get the job. I mean, it's a competitive environment. You have to be the one that answers the most of those questions.
Yep.
And you're up against CIS majors, MS, CS, MIS majors with 5 years experience and digital natives, and if you're not a digital native, you're up against digital natives. So it is a very competitive, stressful,
absolutely.
exercise.
And in many ways, when it comes to this, like any with any pursuit, you have to do your best and you have to be at peace with the outcome. But that job is not the last job interview, and that, you know, we tell our students we do these technical fake interviews so that they can just freeze up and start crying in the room where it doesn't count, and they almost all freeze up. They're like, I think and just stuff that they learned in the first 1 or 2 weeks, it's just gone. It's just gone from their brain because it's so stressful of an environment to have to recall all of this stuff. And for many of you who know, for coding, we have this really weird cargo culting practice where we make potential employees code out code on a whiteboard. Even though no one ever writes code that way, this is a very, very strange thing that technical recruiters do. It's perverse how sinister it is, which is you get to look up stuff online as a professional developer. Nobody's saying like slapping your hand away from the keyboard if you go to Google. It's part of the industry is that you look up things that you don't know. And here, to find out if somebody would be a great fit for our organization, we have them memorize stuff of things. It's so strange and crazy. That's one of our things that we haven't quite yet figured out how to fix in the recruiting process. Yeah, anything else? If you have to go, absolutely understand. We're a little past time. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Let's go ahead and wrap it there. I'm still around for more questions. That's my email there, and that's Twitter below if you want to say hi. And then if you didn't get a chance to answer the questions, we have a lot of really great input from other participants here, so follow up with them as well and find out what's going on. Yeah, good luck to you all. Thank you for coming.